Good evening, everybody, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the Administration and Operations meeting for October the 19th. Thank you for joining us this evening. As far as attendance, I've been advised that Councillor Chambers will not be with us this evening. I believe everybody else is here, so that's good. Approval of the agenda. We do have an addendum with the agenda, and it's my understanding as part of that addendum that the Doss family would like to make a delegation, be part of a delegation this evening. So I guess as committee, we have to do two things. First of all, we need to approve the agenda as the addendum, and we need to decide whether we want to have the Doss family be a delegation. So if I could get somebody to move it first to get it on the floor, Mayor Bailey, Councillor Coleman. Let's discuss how we want to go forward here, committee. Any thoughts? Mayor Bailey?
I think we can let them speak.
Okay. Seconder to that? Councillor Laferriere? Anyone opposed? Okay. Questions regarding it? So we do have one delegation. So I'm going to speak to that one in a minute here, but all those in favor of allowing the Doss family to be a delegation? Opposed? Okay, so that is carried. So we will add that to the delegation as 4.2. So, okay. As far as the agenda, while we're there right now, my understanding is Marlene from the city of Brantford for 4.1. She's kind of got a conflict and she's at another meeting right now. So what I'm going to propose, if it's okay with committee, is that we move that delegation down further into the agenda. She has asked if that's possible to do because she would really like to speak to us. She is new to the position, and I think it would be a good idea to allow her to have a chat with us. So I'm looking for a motion to move it prior to in camera. Councillor Howes and Councillor Coleman.
Mr. Chair.
Councillor Howes.
May I offer a suggestion?
Absolutely.
As we're looking at moving that one down the schedule, and as we're having a delegation from the resident regarding an item that's later on in the agenda, why don't we kind of switch that as well so that we discuss that topic sooner rather than later? That way the resident doesn't have to sit through 2 hours of everything else.
Okay, I was waiting for somebody to do that. A seconder to that motion, Councillor Wheat. Okay, so that is saying we are going to move, where are we here? 8.1. So we're going to have the delegation for Doss, and then we will go directly to 8.1 after that. Okay, committee's good with that? Okay, so we're going to vote now on move, Councillor Gatward. Oh, you're on mute, Councillor.
I also have one item of other business, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have anything to add for other business? Okay, so what we've got here, folks, is we're moving 8.1 up, and we will have that after the Doss delegation. We are moving 4.1 down, and Councillor Gatward has something for other business. Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you for that. Pecuniary interest, if anybody has any, please do say so now or at the appropriate time, and we will go from there. So with that being said, we will start into delegations. So Nathan, I'm not sure if you're going to be speaking or who's going to be speaking here. But we will give you the floor. You have 10 minutes for your presentation, and then will be some questions after that if need be. Okay? So okay. The floor is yours. So please proceed when you're ready.
So this is as a response to the report that'll be coming up right after from the city. And what we would like to clarify and ask our questions is that we have some additional information. And the first one was that we found that legal nonconforming applies to both land, building, and structures. And in section 34(9)(a) under the Planning Act, it addresses it as no bylaw passed under this section applies to prevent the use of any land, building, or structure for any purpose prohibited by the bylaw if such land, building, or structure was lawfully used for such purpose on the day of the passing of the bylaw, so long as it continues to be used for that purpose. And I believe that my historical entrance would be protected under that act. And then when they, in the other report, it claims that we've abandoned the driveway. But again, in the I. M. Rogers in the Canadian Law of Planning and Zoning has noted no clear definition exists as to what constitutes a discontinuance of use. Discontinuance may be equivalent to abandonment, which requires an intention to abandon. In Ontario, cessation of use may show that the owner intended to discontinue the use, but his intention is also an important factor in determining non-conforming use. And since the entrance was covered with moss, not grass, and as it has not been used in recent years and sporadically before that, there was no intention to abandon it, as indicated also in our letter by Linda Geary and in my recent desire to repair it. Another point that we'd like to address is which party should actually provide more evidence, because an affidavit from Linda Geary is evidence that a bona fide historical entrance existed and was used until 2012. We found cobblestone underneath the moss that dates the entrance very old. Over the years, there have been severances and changes to the property that would have been approved by the county. Each time the county could have had the opportunity to negotiate the removal of the entrance, and without any evidence, I would, to that effect, I believe the historical use would remain a legal use. Whether or not there was any document in place, even if it began as an encroachment, I believe that would be considered an easement right that has become grandfathered with each successive owner, unless the party receiving the benefit agrees to a change. This is then placed on the city to provide that an owner gave up the right to that entrance. And then the effect on the neighborhood. What evidence exists that my case will generate a surge of similar cases? Are there good examples of this in the past? I believe for my neighborhood, it is more likely that similar cases, like the ones I submitted before as examples, already have their two entrances firmly established. I am, however, concerned that a complaint produced by someone who did not know the history of the driveway has been valued above my rights, while still respecting the confidentiality of the complaint. Can it be disclosed about the nature of the complaint, including how his complaint is being, how he is being negatively affected by the entrance? I think is a valuable question. The existing of the driveway on Jane Street is a double car driveway that is shared. That means that my property has only the equivalent of a single car width street entrance that opens to a double car width at the top of the hill. Since the aerial photos in Mr. Dermer's report, parking side by side at the top of the hill is the safest and most neighborly way to ensure either of our vehicles can exit without having to regularly rearrange vehicles and to navigate the hill. Much of the additional space that he indicates on the hill is already used as raised gardens. In addition, I would like to highlight the following. My property is zoned HAR2, which allows for a duplex, and it was a duplex for many years. As a duplex, the backyard and side yard would have likely been considered common space. Parking on the Jane Street driveway and walking across either yard to get to the front entrance could have been seen as taking less efforts than using the stairs from the Capron Street driveway. But we do know that from Lydia Geary's letter that the Capron Street driveway was used as a minimum by her tenant's guests. I did not consider walking across my yards as safe or guest friendly to get to the entrance. So I put up a fence and planted trees to discourage anyone from doing that. Trying to get around the house through the hills is not a smart way of trying to get to the front entrance. So I removed that. the Capron Street address of the property and the layout of the interior of the house. It has a very large foyer at the front and a very small kitchen with no foyer at the back, indicate that the Capron Street entrance is where guests would have historically been received. It is also likely where owners would have entered. The Jane Street access was a later addition to the property, having previously been part of a commercial property owned by Linda Geary's dad, which you can see in her letter. Linda Geary's parents lived at 66 Jane Street, the property with the shared driveway. With this historical property, my historical house may not be as glorious as some, I do believe it is a treasure to the community and worth restoring. We do intend to protect the trees and the hill. I am only requesting permission to add fill to level or repair what I believe to be the original driveway. The part that was covered in moss is not grass. No excavation is needed. I am equally concerned about protecting the health of the trees and the integrity of the hill. I believe my original repairs served that purpose and in due time would have once again had moss growing on it. I'd be happy to consult the county staff if there is a better way to accomplish this task with less impact. What is not on the staff report, as per the minutes of September 21, it was suggested a further review to clarify the status of the request and to determine a proper process in terms of encroachment permits, etc. This comment led to the withdrawal of the motion to approve my request, and in my opinion, and to my dismay, the report provided by Mr. Dermers defends prior decisions made by county staff, but fails to incorporate the evidence and questions that led to the request. The report presumes that the committee will agree to its recommendation despite possible evidence to the contrary, or would have included information about the proper process in terms of encroachments and permits. As in number 6, I am happy to work with county staff to prepare whatever permit is deemed necessary for the simple repair of my existing entrance. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions to this point of the delegation? Councillor Howes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick one through you to the delegation. Nathan, thanks for the information. I'm not sure that anyone is disputing the historical story of there being a driveway there at one point, but I am curious about one thing. From your delegation tonight, you mentioned that Linda Geary, in her affidavit, stated that the driveway was in use off Capron up until at least 2012. I believe is what you said. And I just wanted to verify, did Linda Geary own the property up until 2012?
She did, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Laferriere.
Thank you. And thank you, Nathan, for coming to speak to council. When I was chatting with your mom initially, we suggested coming to council because I think there was and you said this in your letter last time, there was a potential for legal action, which if this doesn't pass, you still have all your entitlements to do so. But I think it's best to, whatever happens with the vote today, to come to council and see what council and staff say, and you'll have more information, and we have more information now if it does go that way, which is good. You said in your statement you had a recent desire to repair the usage as a driveway. So when the property was purchased by you, it was not being used as a current driveway. And, you know, is it possible, can you see how that could be construed potentially as an abandonment of the usage?
When I purchased the property, it was previously purchased by my in-laws. And when they purchased it, it was an operating duplex. So although they never planned on repairing that driveway, when I purchased the property, I planned on repairing that driveway because it is the front entrance of the house. when they bought the property in 2012, they spent a lot of time turning the house from a duplex back into a single family home, and their priorities were almost entirely on the interior of the house. But when I married my wife and I bought the house, then I took the rest of the repairs that needed to happen on this property into my ownment, which was repairing first the driveway on Jane, because that was the one that was in use.
Priority.
And then my plan was to use the front driveway because, and it, as you can see, it did turn into a hill over the years and this is just a guess, when you have a duplex, you're not taking care of the property necessarily as you would your own house. So I imagine because there is a giant oak tree or maple tree right over top of that driveway and the pine trees on the other side of it, there would be leaves landing on that driveway every single year for what could have been a 30-year span or 20-year span, and not necessarily always raked up. There was never grass planted there. There's only moss there, but the roots of the trees are now growing in that spot. And you can imagine that all those leaves would have been left there for years. So I bought the property. I have planned to use the front entrance of this property and to use it as my own personal house. I would like to park my car at the front of my house and enter through the front of my house. I would like my guests to come to the front of my house and enter through the front of my house.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, that's a nice segue for my next, well, one of my next questions, which is, my understanding is street parking will be moving to your side of the street permanently in the near future. And I don't know how it works now if you were to park where you wanted to park. But my concern at this time with that bit of knowledge that wasn't really brought forward before when this was presented, and that's nobody's fault, that's just, it's just relevant, but it came up a little later. My concern is that with it being parallel, the drive that you propose being parallel to the street, will be losing more public spots than you could be providing as private spots with the proposed driveway. Are you aware of that dynamic? And how does that even work now when it's the time of the 2 weeks of the month where people would be parking on your side? Would you be parking parallel with doors touching one another, essentially?
So the way I had the original repair, I had left 1 foot in from the curb, and then I had my stone that held back the fill, and then I would park on top of that. There was like a 2 foot plus space between vehicles, both with my car on the slight hill and the car that could be parked on the street.
For you, Mr. Chair, with the public piece, people not realizing that, I wonder if we went back to the neighborhood, how that dynamic would be, if people would like kind of seeing, access issues potentially there. Maybe not, but I just want to make that concern voiced. You said you were happy to connect with staff around better ways to accomplish the parking goal of your delegation. That's good. Shared driveways aren't unusual in the county. They aren't unusual in the province. Would looking at that aspect and maybe widening that be a better solution that has a little less public impact and maybe worth looking into with staff? Is that a route you'd be willing to go down to look if that might solve some of these issues?
So I think the problem there is, again, when you enter the house using that Jane Street access, you're coming immediately into a completely full kitchen. There's nowhere for you to put your boots, hats, coats, or anything, and I can't rewire the entire house to accommodate a change of location. Like, that is the kitchen. That's the design of the house. The front of the house on Capron Street, when you step in that door, you've got and it is a romantic set of stairs up into the house, a nice curved set of stairs. It is the front of the house. It is a well-established front entrance of the house. You would have guests come through those big doors, and you would have guests come into the front hall. There is no way that I could trade the ability to have a guest come and park and walk up the steps into the front house versus coming through the back through the kitchen door forever. Because there's no way that will operate.
My last question then would be, if parking is moving permanently to your side of the street, through you, Mr. Chair, then doesn't that take care of the issue at hand? Because you will have ample parking in front of your house for people to be able to access where you want them to access.
The parking at the front is always full. It's been full for as long as I've been here. Every night when it becomes 5 o'clock, there's no parking along that street with either side that it's on.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the delegation? Okay, seeing none, as far as the delegation is concerned, can I get a motion just to move that in when we're going to be talking about 8.1? Councillor Coleman, Councillor Leferrier. Any questions on that? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, so now we're going to discuss 8.1. There is 8.1 is RPT-21-264. There is a recommendation there. Can I get a mover to get it on the floor? Councillor Coleman, Councillor Gatward. Speaking to the recommendation, any questions? We will note here that the recommendation is that the request to be denied. Are there any questions? Councillor Howes?
More of a comment than a question, Mr. Chair, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I respect Nathan's desire to make this work out. Unfortunately, I find the technical details related to keeping the streets safe, the sight lines, not creating a precedent to allow multiple driveways and properties all over the county, not just the neighborhood. I find that a compelling argument from the staff side of things. And I wish there was a way that we could be a little more accommodating, but even looking at the illustration of, or the photo of Nathan's, his previous attempt at the driveway, you know, the majority, if not all of that extra driveway is on the county boulevard. And that's not something that's allowed anywhere. And I do see some potential conflict with if the parking is all going to be on his side of Capron Street permanently now. I do see, as Mark was illustrating, that the conflict of doors banging into each other. Where does the snow get stacked up? If the snow does get stacked up, does it end up on his driveway? Does it end up on, I see, unfortunately, I see it having too many technical problems. So I just wanted to explain why I will end up supporting the staff recommendation on this.
Thank you. Councillor Miller.
I just want to point out too, this isn't a 2-page report. This is a very, very thorough report that Mr. Demers did. And to be honest, I was kind of supporting Mr. Doss's suggestion there a while back, but I mean, Greg really, the author of the report, really laid it out why he didn't support it. So based on an excellent report that he did, I will support the recommendation. And again, I wish it could be different, but that's how I see it. So thank you.
We're going to go Councillor Gatward and then Councillor Leferrier and then Mayor Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, there is a thorough staff report here. However, the issue that Mr. Doss raised about legal non-conforming and the driveway was previously established, there's actually a curb cut that was probably done by the former town of Paris to allow that driveway. The evidence of the cobblestones indicates, yes, there was a driveway, and I don't know, even though the staff are opposed, that we have the right to take the driveway away. So that's just my opinion on this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Ferrier, then Mayor Bailey.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just my comments too. I will be supporting the recommendation to oppose, but again, it's based on the technical merits of the report, and I'd rather err on the side of caution. However, the whole point of the original discussion and direction for me to Nathan and his mother was to come to council to get more information. And I would suggest that they have other recourses as well. If this doesn't pass, and based on the vibe, I'm sensing it won't or will pass, I should say. Sorry, double negatives here. But with the information now in Greg's very detailed report, I think that would be very much worth taking to their own planner or hiring a planner. If they are going to go the legal route, everybody has some more information now to take it that way. And it was done at the cost of the county as opposed to the cost of the applicant, which is probably a benefit to the applicant, even if they don't get their desired outcome today. So I will be supporting the staff recommendation based on all the technical issues and erring on the side of caution. But they do have another recourse, and one that they were going to look at previously, and they may now have to look at with some more information for all parties involved.
Thank you. Mayor Bailey.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, I feel very badly for Mr. Doss because, as you know, my house, probably the most photographed house in the county, used to have a huge circular driveway in front of my house built to outload people onto my front vestibule. And it's cut into the curbs on Main Street in St. George twice, as the horseshoe would have been cut out in 1888. And all the pictures you see of my house have the original owner standing beside a team of horses in front of my front door. So I understand that if I wanted to take it back the way it was, I wouldn't be able to, because I would mess up all the parking on Main Street in St. George. And I have to enter my 30-room house through my back door and up a public parking lot. So times change. And although I would love to have a big horseshoe driveway to park my cars in front of my house, I can't have that either, because too much has happened and too much time has gone around the town planning for me to ever ask for that back. And although I'm looking at the picture of your house and I can see it exactly the way you want it to look, and I feel badly that it's going to be a fight for you, but I too have to support a very well done report by staff. But living where I live, seeing what I've seen my house look like, I feel very badly for the results of tonight's vote, I think. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we do have a recommendation that has been moved and seconded. Just to confirm again, the recommendation is to deny the additional driveway. So no further questions. I will call the vote. All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? Okay, that recommendation is passed. So Mr. Doss, just so you know, the recommendation has been passed by this committee, but it will go to council at the end of the month for final approval on that. So, okay, so because we're moving the other delegation later on in the agenda, we are now on section 5, adoption of the previous minutes. Can I get a mover? Mayor Bailey, Councillor Bell, any questions on the previous minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Any business arising from the minutes? Councillor Miller and then Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I got to do this just because I got to keep it alive, because sometimes things get buried and I've seen that happen too. So just, I'm just would like, I'd like to record in the minutes that we still don't have a date for when staff will be able to look at the lights in the Highland Estates area. So I'm not looking for an answer tonight, but I just, like I said, I'd like to keep this alive month by month. So I just want that in the minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is in respect, or my comment is in respect of 8.5 in the minutes, which are the proposed community safety zones. It says in discussion, it was suggested that consideration of enhanced safety zones in the vicinity of retirement homes and trailheads be considered. Just wondered if there was an update on that, or if we had a timing by which we would get a response.
Okay. Anybody from staff able to? Mr. Bradley, you able to speak to that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll address that as well as a number of other items that came forward at our last, the meeting we had just a week ago, Robin will be bringing a comprehensive report back on a number of topics, mostly related to automated speed enforcement, but she's going to research and cover that at the same report. And you should see that report before the end of the year. So.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, one more thought, if I may. At that meeting that Mr. Bradley refers to, I read the report from the City of Hamilton. Interesting report. They have concluded that they will create quite a few more community safety zones. It didn't appear that they were limited to the restrictions that we appear to have limited ourselves to in our report 21223, which we covered in 8.5 last meeting. So I hope that we can be flexible, because I think there's an opportunity there. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, any other business arising from those minutes? Okay, seeing none, we move on. Consent items. There's a few of them here. So we've got consent items to be approved. 7.1.1, which is RPT-21-221, the contracted wastewater operations. There is a recommendation there. Can I get a mover? Councillor Howes, Councillor Gatward. Any questions on that report? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, and in the report, there's mention of our purchasing policy, which allows direct negotiation of an existing contract, which would prove more cost effective or beneficial. I think we all know about that. My question is and I guess I could have researched this myself, but in our purchasing policy, is there anything that talks about length of the contract? Obviously, this one is for 10 years. I'm just wondering, again, that seems like a long time. I know we've been with these guys for a long time already. Chances are in 11 years, we'll probably go with them. But is there anything in the purchasing policy that talks about the length of some of these contracts? And that's my question, because it does seem like a long time.
All right, General Manager Walton, I see you've come on here.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Miller. I don't believe there's anything in there that dictates the length of contracts. And just for council's information, contracts like this, the current contracts like this, if we were going out for a new contract, likely would be a 10-year contract with extensions added to it. The potential of it being extended out. Now, this is an extension of an existing contract. The reason we picked 5, I actually originally was proposing to put in the report actually 2 5-year extensions to the existing contract, which could easily have been written into the original contract if we were writing it today, which is sort of commonplace. The reason we chose not to do that is because we'll have 2 major upgrades of plants going on in the middle of that time frame. St. George and Paris likely will be right around being planned. So this time period gets us over probably both of those expansions. And I think that's a very important thing to note, even though we didn't note that in the report. So that's why the 10 years is being provided. When a contractor like this is coming into a new contract, you need a time frame for this, for them to be stocked up with both staff and the resources that they need from their end to be able to put those over a period of time to make the amortization of their costs to be worthwhile for us. So that's why you're into these time lengths for these sort of things. And I think the 10 years here to get us past both St. George and Paris being upgraded is a very important consideration.
Councillor Miller, you good with that?
No, I appreciate the answer, but things are going to look a lot different in a decade, I tell you. But I appreciate the answer.
True enough. Any other questions to this report? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Moving on, 712, which is RPT-21-265, the gravel crushing. There is a recommendation there. Can I get a mover? Councillor Wheat, Councillor Coleman. Any questions on this report? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Simple question. Do we do this annually? And if we do, why? Why would we not consider a longer period than 1 year?
General Manager Walton.
Through Mr. Chair to Councillor Bell, I'll have to admit up front, I don't really know the answer to that question. It's always been done annually. Certainly, there's a good piece of work to be done every year. The amounts will change every year depending on what you're anticipating to do. I think that the answer is for an operation like this, it's a move in, move out thing. So it isn't a long-term setup. So annually makes sense. We could certainly consider and talk to the contractors and see whether if they got it for a 3-year period, whether that would be, beneficial for them to set up their business plan for working with us. But this is the way it was tendered this year. It certainly could be looked at for the next one.
Councillor Bell, okay. Any other questions to this report? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Moving on to 7.13, RPT-21-275, the Kingsville Community Center Tender Award. Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Bell, Mayor Bailey. Questions on the report? Councillor Wheat.
Yes, I'd like a recorded vote, please. There's a lot of bids there.
Okay. Any other questions on the report? Councillor Gatward, and then Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wondered, does this price include landscaping, equipment, inside hall furniture and appliances? And does it include a project manager supplied by Reed and DeLange? Thank you.
Kathy, I see you on there. You want to answer that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The landscaping is included in this tender, and there will be a project manager on site from Reed and DeLange for this project. And the furnishings are not included. This is the consulting and construction budget. There is a different amount allocated for the furnishings.
Okay, that's good, Councillor Gatward. Okay, Councillor Bell, and then Mayor Bailey.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Question to staff. There's been a significant increase in the price from the current budget figure. Has there been a change in the scope that would account for some of this? I understand the supply chain pressures and I recognize them in all walks of life. But if we've also changed scope in the meantime, I'd appreciate to know what we've done.
Kathy, go ahead. Or
Thank you,
Cindy.
Mr. Chair. The scope has changed slightly since the original estimates were made. The community consultation that we did provided us with some feedback of additional spaces that the public would like included, including the meeting room. And that additional square footage was added. And we did discuss that at a previous meeting when this design was approved.
Did you want to add any of that, Cindy, or?
I could add that when the detailed design was approved by council last November, the cost per square foot was estimated at $327 per square foot. And as you can see in the report tonight, through escalating cost pressures through the pandemic, we're now at $563 a square foot. So that explains the significant difference in what was brought to council back last November and today.
Yeah, I think as Councillor Bell alluded to there, it's kind of affecting all walks of life. So I think that's unfortunately to be expected. Okay, Mayor Bailey. Sorry, Councillor Bell, you're good with that? Okay, Mayor Bailey.
Yeah, I would just like to remind council or committee through you, Mr. Chair, that this project was, a lot of time went into this project. We muddled with it, we shrunk it, we grew it, we had it picture perfect. And this was about to take place the same time as the health hub. This is a true casualty of COVID. We talk about COVID in so many different ways of production and variations of pricing and things like that. But this is the true project that was stopped by COVID. And we promised the people of Kingsville, and they've been very patient through COVID, as a lot of people have, but they've watched an awful lot of stuff happen around the county since we promised them. In fact, I told a lady, you know, one year from tonight, you'll be sitting here with a gin and tonic. And I said, you know, you're our first priority, and you've been very patient. And we ironed out all the details. We took away everything we could. We made it bare bones perfect to the people of Kingsville. And I hope that this can be supported by this committee just because it's time to do it. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Coleman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to further echo what the mayor has said, he is absolutely correct. This project has been going on for over 5 years now. I started with the previous council, and he's right. It has been affected by COVID greatly and changed in any ways to make it the best suiting thing for the community. And one thing we have done is went to the community and had community meetings and had great feedback from everybody. So I hope everybody can support this. And I know it's more money, but I think after what we've seen here a little while ago on the washrooms on the side of the council chambers, this is pretty cheap.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? Mayor Bailey?
Yeah, the only other thing I'd like to say is that the component, the fundraising component can be relooked at. We can, if this committee will support this tonight, I don't think, I have no trouble meeting with Councillor Coleman and going back to the principal players of the design of this facility and just telling them, because they're very aware of the reality of COVID. And we had a sort of a number in our mind that they would help with to raise money. And I think that we could go back to them. And I think Councillor Coleman and I could just tell them the way it is, and perhaps we could do something different for fundraising too. So let us do our magic behind the scenes too. And perhaps it won't be such a big difference when we're finished.
Oh, that's a good point. And I think just one thing I'd like to add, and it was kind of, it was mentioned in here, the fact that with the public meetings, we took what the public was saying into consideration and made some changes to it. And I think that's a very important part of a lot of things we do as a county, as a council, is we do get public input in there. So this just goes to show you that it's, you know, unfortunately, as some say, lip service is not lip service. We do listen to what the public is saying. And here's a classic example of, we've taken what the public said and we've made some changes to something that's very important and well-deserved. So if there's no further questions, we have been asked for a recorded vote by Councillor Wheat. So I would ask the clerk, Heather.
Yep.
If you could please do your thing.
Sure. Councillor Wheat,
Yes.
Mayor Bailey,
Yes.
Councillor Gatward,
Yes.
Councillor Coleman,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Pierce,
Yes.
Councillor House,
Yes.
Councillor LaFerriere,
Yes.
Councillor McAlpine,
Yes. Councillor Bell votes
Motion-
yes as well.
Oh,
Forgot
sorry,
about
Councillor
Councillor
Bell. I
Bell.
knew I was missing one. Carried.
Okay, so let the record show that was a unanimous decision. Thank you for that. Okay, we are going to move on now. We are now in 7.1.4, which is RPT-21-276, the Oakland Cemetery expansion. There is a recommendation there. Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Wheat, seconder. Mayor Bailey, questions on the report? Councillor Gatward and then Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the cemetery staff. Thank you for this report and the layout that you've provided. And my question, I have a couple questions. The water tank, will it be moved to where that little indent is on the plan?
Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think we've determined exactly where it will go yet, Councillor Gatward, but it will definitely be moved into a more central location for people.
Okay, great. And the other question I had, when we met on site, the land that's the existing abandoned driveway, when the former township of Oakland moved the cemetery driveway to the east, very easterly part of the cemetery, there was a section there that was left vacant. Is that included in this approval from the bereavement authority to make that area cremation lots? Or is that going to be done separately?
Kathy?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that would be done separately, Joan, because the expansion is a different process that we have to go through with the BAO.
And this is part of the old existing cemetery, so that's why.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much, Kathy.
Okay, Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Kathy. Kathy, you say you're gonna looking for surplus funds from the Scotland and Harley Cemetery road paving. When I'm reading that, I'm under the impression, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that the paving in Scotland and Harley cemeteries is done, and these are funds that are no longer needed for that purpose. Is that correct? The paving's all done?
Yes, that is correct. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So moving on, 7.1.5, which is RPT 21-283 with a surplus. There is a recommendation. Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Howes, Councillor Bell. Questions on the report? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Moving on to 7.16, RPT 21-284. Councillor Ferrier?
I'd like to move it, then I have a question.
Okay, yeah. Seconder? Mayor Bailey? Go ahead, Councillor Ferrier.
Thank you. Just wondering, similar to Councillor Bell's question about the, why do we do this every year? I'm wondering if this would make more sense in the future to come as a general policy, because I know the dates change, but it's always, X amount of hours into Christmas and after this and that. Just wondering if that might be something worth exploring instead of just having that little question mark for staff to not really know what days we're going to have off or they're going to have off. We don't get days off.
Mr. Bradley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I think, that would be fine. I think we're fine to bring the report forward every year because the holidays move through the course of the week, the gap changes a little bit every week. So I'm not sure how we would structure that. And I guess the other thing is, if something changed dramatically from this year to next year, we may not want this. I don't know what those things would be, but if there's some provincial policy change around how taxes were collected or year-end activities that we do, we may not want to do this. So right now it makes sense for us to recommend this, but we may not in the future. So I don't have any problem with it coming forward as an annual report. But if council wanted to pass direct us to prepare a policy to make this a standing rule, that would be fine too. So.
Or through you, Mr. Chair, or even just delegation of authority to staff. We went on a big kick this term to give staff some more authority for some of those things so they don't come to council. And ironically, I'm making an issue of it and taking time, but the point being that maybe it'd be less in the future for everybody involved just to delegate this to staff, to the CAO or whomever.
Mr. Chair, through you. So we will be updating the delegation of authority bylaw. There's 2 or 3 things we missed in it that have come to fruition, especially through the COVID pandemic. So I'll put that on my task list to discuss with the county solicitor, and if it makes sense, that might be a good place to capture it. So.
Thank you for that. Any other questions to that report? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Note that Councillor Chambers has joined us. I think he's been here for about 10 minutes or so. Welcome. Okay, that's all the approved. So moving on now to 7.2, I see 3 recommendations there, items to be received. If nobody wants any of them pulled, I'm looking for a mover for all 3. Councillor Coleman, Councillor Miller, any questions on any of them? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, moving over to 8.1 we've already dealt with. So 8.2, which is RPT-21-278, the new customer service model. Mr. Bradley, are you there? I think Mr. Bradley wants to have a quick little chat about this before we get into it, but I'm first going to ask for somebody to move it to get it on the floor. Councillor Howes, Councillor Coleman. Mr. Bradley, go ahead if you could, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and certainly staff are available here, the staff that worked on the report to provide further information. But I just wanted to let council know we've talked a lot about the learnings we've had through the COVID-19 experience, and are we going to carry some of those learnings forward as the organization moves forward. And I think this report is a good example of some learnings we've taken and some time we've spent to think about how we're going to sustain operations going forward. And so we're bringing this report forward. I recognize there's some change that we're proposing in this report. We believe that it's going to expand, maintain both in-person and non-in-person customer service, as well as expand that to the public. I just wanted to caution council. So we've put quite a bit of time in this, but we don't have all the details worked out. We reached a point where we said, okay, we think we've got all the principles and the mechanics of this worked out. We should get council to either give us their buy-in or not for this before we get into the what I would call the real finite details of this approach. So staff won't have all of the answers, all of the little mechanical details of this, but we do have a good grasp on the principles of what we're proposing here. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll leave any questions to Mr. Crozier and Ms. Fair, and I'm here as well. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, it just a quick observation of that. It's a very good report, and when we see something that we're adding, in excess of 100 hours of potential time for the public, I think that's kind of a win-win situation there. So I will ask any questions or comments on the report. Councillor Gatward, then Councillor Howes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'd like to thank Adam for this innovative report. It's an idea that was brought forward a number of years back, and I'm all in favor of increasing customer service to our residents. I think that's very important. And I realize the nitty-gritty isn't worked out, but I'm going to ask one question that I think is really important. When the library is open and the staff that man the customer service portion, if there's not a bank in the community, how will they handle the cash and the security at the end of the evening? I know that 3 of the communities have banks and probably night deposit boxes, but 2 of them don't. So I just wondered about that. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I can't take very much of the credit for the innovation on this. That goes a lot to Heather Fair. She put a lot of work into this along with Kelly Bernstein from the library, and Michael and Mr. Walton. So secondly, again, we've fleshed out some details, but certainly there's been much of the hours added for library staff account for the need to do nightly deposits. Again, whether that goes directly to a bank or goes to the Brantford office for Treasury staff to handle will yet to be determined, but that was accounted for.
Councillor Howes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a comment, not a question. I just wanted to say I do support this fully. Mark and I sit on the library board, and when it came up on the library board agenda, everybody was in favor. But I also wanted to, excuse me, see what the kind of the reaction was of the library staff, and I checked in with Kelly Bernstein today, and Kelly was able to report that staff has responded very favorably about this. Obviously, there's going to be details to flesh out, and we have to make sure that the staff is not overwhelmed, but that will be handled. And we have a very talented staff at all of our libraries, and I just think this is a great example of cooperation and a win-win situation. We may see some new faces in our libraries, and it's just all good. I'm very supportive of this.
Very good. Any other questions, comments? Okay. That being said, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. I will make note that Councillor Coleman is voting while he's working. That's very good, my friend. Thank you.
Councillor Chambers, yeah, the most agrarian council vote in history on the tractor.
Okay, so that finishes up 8.2. Communications, I don't see any. Councillor Gatward, you had something for other business?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Last week, I had the pleasure of attending a cybersecurity forum, and it was hosted by AMO and MISA. They had excellent speakers. There was 2 technical speakers who were fascinating and just absolutely so interesting. We could have listened for another hour. There was one insurance professional and also one lawyer who was a breach coach for corporations who are hacked by software such as ransomware. And I learned at the forum that ransomware is now the biggest problem that corporations face. And the city of Woodstock had a ransomware hack, and it cost $700,000. So I had some questions for our staff that came up at the forum, and I'm not going to ask them tonight, but I think it was a very informative, worthwhile AMO presentation, and I just wanted to make all of council aware of it. And I have information if anybody's interested in getting more details. And one of the speakers even offered to do a dark web scan for everybody that attended. And there was almost 100 participants. So it was quite interesting. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have.
Thank you for that. Okay, so I'm going to, I don't see that Marlene is on yet. I don't see her on as yet. So what I'm going to suggest here, committee, if we could, I would like to amend the previous motion to put her presentation prior to in camera and move it till we are out of in camera. Can I get a mover? Councillor Wheat, Councillor Howes? Anybody opposed to that? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, so we will move 4.1 till after the in camera. So with that being said, can I get a motion to go in camera? Mayor Bailey, Counselor Coleman, all in favor? Opposed? Okay. If you would, please, Heather, shoot us into in camera. Okay, did everybody make the journey?
Everyone's here, Councillor Pierce.
Fantastic. Okay. So welcome back, folks. We've just come from in camera. I do see Marlene has joined us here, which is fantastic. Excellent. So what we're going to do is we are going to go back to 4.1, which is we've got Marlene Miranda, the General Manager of Community Service and Development from the City of Brantford, is here to make a presentation for us this evening. Now, I'm going to ask committee here. I'm thinking that this may take more than 10 minutes. So I'm going to ask committee if we're going to extend the time past the 10 minutes. Can I get somebody to motion that? Councillor Howes, Councillor Bell, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So with that being said, Marlene, welcome. I'm not sure if you have anybody with you, but welcome, and the floor is yours. So when you're ready, please proceed.
Evening through the chair. I was hoping that the presentation could be put up as well. So if I could ask staff to put that presentation up for us, that would be fantastic. Thank you. So through the chair, for those of you who I haven't met, my name is Marlene Miranda, the General Manager of Community Services and Social Development, and the Consolidated Municipal Service Manager, both for the County of Brant and the City of Brantford. I'd like to thank you for the invitation and for having our team here tonight provide an overview of the services and programs that are provided to both municipalities and to answer any questions that you may have. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with the Brant Count staff over the last several months, and we are looking forward to the continued relationships. I would like to take a moment to introduce the directors who are with me this evening, and we'll be walking you through the presentation and the services that are provided. With me this evening are Aaron Wallace, the Director of Community Programming and Social Development, Sue Evenin, the Director of Community Income and Stability, and Deb Schlichter, the Acting Director of Housing and Homelessness. This evening, we will walk through the slide deck, and we kindly request that Council delay questions to the end if that is agreeable. Next slide, please. The Consolidated Service Manager is legislated under several provincial acts, including but not limited to the Child Care Act, the Ontario Works Act, and the Housing Services Act. The service manager provides several social services, including social assistance, housing and homelessness, and childcare and early year services. Across the province, there are 37 consolidated municipal service managers, which are a mix of single tier, upper tier, and lower tier. And there are also 10 district social services administration boards in the north. I would now like to turn it over to Deb to provide an overview of the programs within housing and homelessness services and an update on several exciting projects that we are working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlene. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview of housing and homelessness services. I'm going to try to do this in 10 minutes or less. Next slide, please. We have three main areas of work: our housing operations, our housing programs, and our housing stability programs, and then a number of sort of core areas of functions. I'm going to walk you through very quickly those pieces. Next slide, please. Housing operations, this is the community housing provider hat that we wear. We provide, we're basically a landlord, a number of units, 1,190 units across 80 properties, different sizes. So we could have from single family homes all the way up to mid-size apartments for families, for seniors, and for single and couples. So different types of units, rent geared to income, and market rent. And so this would be what we call our, we refer to this as sort of that legacy stock. This is the stock that was transferred from the province, and we call it community housing because it's older stock. It's also subsidized with rent and operational budget, and it provides the rent geared to income units. So that's a specific type of stock that we have. We're the largest affordable housing landlord. In the County of Brant, we have a number of units spread around. I've listed the ones that are part of that stock, 95 units in total. Next slide, please. Housing programs, operations is basically your property management functions. And so this is the type of work that they do: property management, building maintenance, determining eligibility, collecting rent, tenant services. We try to work from an eviction prevention stance. So lots of supports before we get to that point. And then, of course, the capital assets. Next slide, please. Housing programs, just switch over to that area of work. We have funding that comes to us through federal and provincial dollars. They're affectionately called COCHI and OPI. They stand for a lot of words there. I've left them there on on the slide for you, but basically they have different focus areas, but that funding we use for a number of programs. And I'm going to walk you through those programs. So next slide, please. Kochi is primarily used for the stock that we have, ensuring that it stays in good condition. So for repairs, we've used the funding for a number of repairs. In the County Brant, you see the very last bullet, we used a significant portion of this money for Walker's Green. We get funding on a yearly basis. So this is for the last 3 years, and then we get another 3-year tranche. Next slide, please. This is the OP side of the funding. It's a little bit different in terms of that it can go broader. We can use it for a number of different areas. It's up to service manager to decide which pocket to put the funding in. We're going to show you a couple of those different programs in the next slide, but new construction is a key one. You'll see the repairs again, there's more funding for repairs. We've used again from this fund, 842,000 for a Trillium Way repairs. So a significant portion going to County Brant. Switch to the next slide, please. Here's a couple of the different programs. I'm just going to walk through them very quickly. We'll leave the slides with you with a lot more information, but Ontario Renovates is basically a forgivable loan. We help people with some major structural needs for low-income homeowners. Also, if they have accessibility modifications that they need. A very well-used program. B Homes is our affordable home ownership program where we offer down payment assistance. This program has not been very well utilized this last year, given that the market has gone quite a bit high, and we have a limit as to the price of the homes have to be 400,000 or less. So that's been a restricted program. Support services. We are using that to provide extra services at Marlene Avenue. Next slide, please. Rent supplements, another program where we subsidize a number of landlords. There's quite a few landlords. There's 374 landlords. 17 are in the County of Brant, those units where we subsidize the difference between what people can pay and what the market rent is. Those are units, not landlords, sorry. And then a new program that we've been able to access as of last year is the Canada Affordable Ontario Housing Benefit. This is a portable benefit, so people are able to take this benefit wherever they move to, so they can move to another municipality and take it with them. We only had so many spots the first couple of years. We are looking forward to a larger contribution next year. This is a very handy one for people who can't wait for the rent geared to income units. We've targeted it for people who are at risk of homelessness. Next slide, please. I'm going to move to the housing stability program. So again, these programs are highlighted for the homelessness program area, and we use this funding to help with a number of services. The funding comes from different sources. Federal money is the Reaching Home. Provincial money is what we call CHIPPE, Community Homelessness Prevention Initiative. And then there's some municipal funding coming from the City of Brant and the County of Brant. City of Brantford and County of Brant. New program this year was library partnership, where we had an outreach worker hosted in the library. That worked out really well, and we're hoping to continue that project. Next slide, please. Emergency shelter beds, a key part of the housing stability programs. We we provide funding to community agencies that provide these services, a number of beds through the regular shelter system. And then we also have some additional shelter beds with supports, basically 2 of them. One of those is in Paris, the Penmarvian home. Very lovely home. We've recently had a tour, very stately home, 30 beds there for seniors. Next slide, please. Housing Resource Center is also funded through this program, and we this is the Salvation Army runs this, and there's a number of services that come out of that. But basically, it's for people who are looking for housing or struggling at risk of homelessness. They can get a number of services directly from this agency. Next slide, please. We do a database to try to keep a more awareness of who is in the homelessness system, and this is the HIFIS database. This really gives us a better idea of who is in and out of the programs. Coordinated access is the next piece. Once we have the HIFIS system is being used across the system, then we can create what we call a by name list of people who are known to be homeless, and then we give them they go through an assessment tool to figure out what their acuity needs are. The highest acuity people are at the top of the list, and we then do placement by the people at the highest acuity level. Next slide, please. So another function we offer is the affordable housing waitlist. We manage this program. We have about, at this point, 1,450 households on this waitlist. This is what we call a modified chronological wait system. So you wait in line based on your date of application, but there are some folks who can get priority. So victims of domestic violence. And then we also have the homeless individuals and families are also prioritized. Next slide, please. This is only for our rent geared to income units. And here you see a wait list of where people are waiting. People can wait for a number of different housing options, and they can wait across the county as well as the city. So these numbers do not add up to that same number of total because people can apply for several places at the same time. But this gives you an indication of who is waiting and interested in housing in those communities. Next slide, please. We also administer funding to other community housing providers. So this is another oversight and funding role that we have. And across those providers, there's another 737 units. Next slide, please. New supply is an important area. Over the last number of years, between 2006 and 2011, a number of new rental units were created. These are all what we call our new type. The other type we talked about was community housing. This is called affordable housing. It's not rent geared to income, it's below market. So they're either at 100% or at 80% or at 60% of the average market rent. So they're below market. That's what's make them affordable. And then we often partner with community agents or groups to create these, and a number of them were created. 48 units were created in Paris, Riverbanks Apartments and GK your county site. Next slide, please. In the last couple of years, we've been working on creating some supply that the service manager would also administer, own, and operate. And so a number of units have been added as well that way. A number of below market and some rent geared to income units. Next slide, I'll show you some pictures. This is the John Noble home, 57 senior units. Next slide, please. Home for Good funded program. It is 100% funded. We use this to build the Marlene Avenue apartments, and it also operates the support services for that program. So again, fully funded through the Home for Good funding. I'm going to switch to the next slide. Here's some pictures of Marlene Avenue. This is for folks who are needing 24/7 care, high acuity folks that have had chronic homelessness experience. So again, a very important program in our range of housing. Next slide, please. I want to touch on some big plans that we have in place, and this will also mention our new supply plans. We have a housing stability plan. This guides our work and our focus for the 10-year time frame. We are getting close to the end of this plan. We'll have to create a new one, but this helps us focus on what the priorities are for the community and where, when we get funding, and we can allocate funding to those priorities. Next slide, please. This is my second to last slide. Brantford Municipal Housing Master Plan. This is a key one. This is to create municipal housing, 506 units over 10 years. We've already completed the Marlene Avenue one. We've got others in progress. That's Sturton Avenue, Trillium Way. You might be familiar with that one. We're wanting to get, that's in progress, and Shellard Lane. And also Coburn, 177 Coburn is not mentioned there. But we are working on all of these to create that overview. And then the last one is our Mayor's Housing Partnership Task Force Action Plan. These will also be action items that we report on a yearly basis on the progress of these action plans. And I believe that's the end of my piece. Next slide. Yes, thank you very much. Bye.
Good evening. Again, Susan Evenden, Director of Family and Income Stability. Always really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you. Many of you know that I live in the county. I happen to live in a ward that is well represented by Chair Pierce and his ward mate, Councillor Bell. And so I feel that our work literally takes care of my neighbors. Throughout the county, particularly in Paris right now, where I live, the communities are really changing. And working together with County Council and staff, our Community Services and Social Development Commission really, we feel plays a role in making sure that everyone shares in the current growth and prosperity. Next slide. So when someone in the county finds themselves in need of help, our offices and intake lines have typically been a place to reach out for that help. With COVID-19 and lockdowns, accessing social assistance has shifted a bit, and now people are really making contact exclusively online or by phone. And financial benefits are in the process of being centralized with the province. And we're actually leading out ahead a little bit in Brantford Brant because we're considered what they're calling a prototype. Probably commonly we used to refer to it as pilots for the centralized intake. And so that means that most of our citizens now are now contacting either by phone or online to a central intake unit that's administered by the province. The turnaround times to receive a first payment is set at 4 business days, and that's assuming that the person is going to submit all the required information. But if it's a very simple application, actually, sometimes people can receive their first payment as soon as the next day. So the next slide. Once initial eligibility has been determined for Ontario Works financial assistance, then the local office becomes more involved. And really, when people first come to us, they're in some kind of a life crisis. It might be a job loss, it might be a relationship breakdown. And so really getting that financial assistance settled is their first priority. Many of you know that the eligibility rates and rules are really set by provincial legislation, and it considers people's income, assets, and living arrangements. It still is an incredibly complex program to administer with over 800 rules for eligibility. And so when you're inquiring about constituent concerns, maybe they've been found ineligible, even though we didn't make the rules, we certainly do what we can within the rules that we're given to respond to people's individual circumstances. I did put on this slide, just for your reference, some of the current maximum rates. And you will all, I'm sure, be familiar with what the rental costs are in Brant County and the surrounding area. And so clearly, housing would typically consume pretty much all of a recipient's check, leaving little or no funds for some of those basic needs, food and hygiene. So our social assistance Ontario Works recipients, particularly those that are single, they really are living in very deep poverty, and food insecurity is an extremely difficult circumstance. I'm just noticing that the slides haven't quite caught up. So I'm just going to take a moment. There we go. Yeah, just this is the slide that I was referring to with the rates. So you can see the $733 for a single, for example. A couple with no dependents would get $1,136. So if we can move to the next slide. This is just a quick look at the distribution of cases. So right now, current as of September, there were 122 families in Brant County receiving Ontario Works. That's 7.3% of the total caseload. That number obviously varies. As a result of the pandemic, we have seen the caseloads decline by 25 to 30% across the province, and we're no exception. However, we do anticipate that as soon as the federal pandemic income assistance, such as CRB, winds down, which could be as soon as this month, we will start to see those cases increase. 80% of our cases or more, depending on the month, are in Paris, so sort of the white central area of the map. And then the rest of the cases are distributed in the surrounding areas, with the smallest number of cases kind of in the St. George area. So if we could go to the next slide. In addition to the basic financial assistance that's outlined in legislation, we also do provide some special additional items that are very necessary for both Ontario Works and Ontario Disability recipients, as well as some low-income citizens as a result of means testing. And these are really things that are critical to people's health and well-being, things like dentures, emergency dental work, eyeglasses, payments for things like physiotherapy and mobility devices, and other types of items where the cost is not fully covered through other government programs. And as we know, there are still a lot of gaps in the healthcare system and things that are not funded, even some basic healthcare items. And so that's what these programs kind of help to fill. We also do issue some non-health items such as cribs and car seats, again, incredibly necessary for the health and well-being of the family. Next slide. Thank you. So we did just discuss the inadequacy of rates. And so ultimately the goal is for all adult members of a family to achieve a more sustainable income and improve their quality of life. And so our staff work with every recipient to put together a plan to move their life forward in that direction. Another recent provincial change means that our staff are no longer providing employment services directly as they used to in the past. They are now provided by Employment Ontario. One of the Employment Ontario partners in this area, which is St. Leonard's, actually does the majority of the service in the county of Brant. So next slide. Something that we encounter very commonly is that we're working with individuals who are not really ready for employment at this moment. And so our staff work with them to create a plan and link them to services, things that are going to help them resolve the challenges that they're experiencing and become more employable. So on this slide, we've just shown you examples of the services that we're collaborating with to help clients move forward. Next slide. So because we recognize, I think we all recognize, the importance of early intervention and how critical that is to people's outcomes later in life, we are offering some specific programs with a focus on youth. There's a program for youth with disabilities that's been funded 100% by the province. It's a time-limited program, unfortunately, until June of next year. So we're assisting 80 youth with that project, and I know that 4 of them are youth that reside in the county of Brant. We also have our long-standing learning, earning, and parenting program, and that's targeted at young parents and with a goal to encouraging them to complete high school and move into post-secondary. And that also has 4 county clients currently enrolled. And those programs are really showing some encouraging results in areas like their health and mental health, completion of high school, moving into employment, and encouraging, and later we'll be hearing from our children's services group, encouraging those young parents to take advantage of the many resources that are there to support them with their parenting. Next slide. So something that's important for us is to make sure that the services that are delivering value, both to the people we serve and to the community and to the various levels of government that fund our services. And so we do have a quality strategy that we invest resources in activities such as staff learning so they can remain current with latest techniques, best practices. We perform audits and enhanced verification on client files to ensure that there's the correct amount of entitlement being issued. We provide for an appeal mechanism when people feel they received an incorrect decision, and we're actively improving our data collection and analysis capabilities so that our decision-making becomes increasingly data informed. And finally, a very exciting slide. The next slide shows the, you'll all recognize, I'm sure, the new health hub. And so we're excited to resume in-person services at the satellite location at the new health hub in the near future. Thank you. I'm going to hand it off to Erin.
Did we lose them? Hello?
Oh, sorry, folks, dramatic pause there. So good evening. I'm Aaron Wallace. I'm Director of Community Programs and Social Development through you, Councillor Pierce. As the chair to members of committee, always happy for the chance to come and talk about children's services and early years. So like Sue and Deb, I'll give a bit of an overview of the different programs, but happy to answer any questions this evening or any questions you have in the future. We're always happy to talk about children's services and the work we do for the little folks in the county and the city. So if we move to our first slide, the core responsibilities, these are the central areas I'll talk about tonight. Again, keeping it fairly high level, but willing to dive into any of those areas that are of interest to you. Really here, what we're trying to accomplish is create a really strong licensed childcare system in partnership with the Ministry of Education, and also just make it a great experience for kids and families that are coming through that program. So we can move on to the first slide there. This is the support we give to licensed childcare operators. These are childcare centers. So we support 56 licensed childcare centers and a number of home-based licensed childcare operators. 15 of those centers are in the county, and that represents 1,100 licensed childcare spaces of the total 4,000 that we have oversight for. So there's a couple of reasons that we support childcare centers directly. One is that if we can help offset some of their costs, they can pass some of those savings on to their customers in a sense and keep those childcare rates low for everybody across the community. The second reason we do it is we want to have a really good experience for those children and those families who are going into those centers. So some of the things we do, we talk about general operating. That's really helped to offset rent or utilities or those ongoing operational expenses. We do provide some funds and some work around what we call capacity building. But really there, we're just saying childcare can be fairly complicated. There's lots of legislation and public health guidelines. There's food sometimes. So there's a lot going on. So we can bring together people for workshops or trainings or conferences. It just helps keep our skill level as a sector really high and lots of good information sharing. We also help people with kind of special projects as well. So if they're looking to upgrade their toys or their playground, that's help we can provide as well. And we do know that it's very difficult to retain early childhood educators. Often in a childcare center, they're working a split shift. They may not be making an incredibly high wage. So one of the programs the province delivers through us to both the county and city operators was called a wage enhancement grant. So we can give operators $2 on top of the early childhood educator's wage, so they can bump up that wage a bit and try to keep those staff with them as long as they can. We know kids get very attached to their daycare teacher, and so good retention makes for a good program for some of those little folks as well. You see on their expansion, I'm going to leave that. I want to talk a little bit about the future of the childcare sector right at the end. So I'm going to skip over that one and move to our next slide, which is the wait list. So underappreciated, of course, in the world of social services is wait lists, but this is a really great one-stop shop for anyone who's looking for local childcare. So you come onto the One List site, you give us the number of kids you've got, their ages, the centers you'd like to access, what special needs they may have. And from there, we can pick you up, put you on the wait list, let operators know you're out there and you're looking, but also for our staff to know if you need some of those special supports to go with it. That's where we'll pick you up and have that conversation with you as well. So right now, snapshot in time, there's about 673 kids on the wait list across the two communities. So there certainly is demand for childcare out there. 18% of those kids on the wait list are county kids. So we'll move to the next slide and talk a little bit about fee subsidies. So one of the things, and this will be a recurring theme in our discussion this evening, is not all families are the same. Families are coming to this system with different needs. Some maybe because they're starting out in their career, or they're going back to school, don't have a lot of money in their pocket right at the moment. And so we need them to be able to access childcare as well. We need them to be able to go back to school, finish their education, get started in that career, come back from their maternity leave, whatever that story is going to be. And so with fee subsidy, what we're able to do is offset some and sometimes all of the cost of childcare, depending on what the family's income is. And what's really interesting about fee subsidy, I've talked a lot about childcare centers, but we can also offset the cost of summer camps, March break camps, winter holiday camps, that kind of thing as well, and after school programs. So some of the kids you see coming into your county recreation for your summer and your winter camps are kids that we've been able to help out get there. So not only can we subsidize their childcare experience in their center, we can also get them into some of those fun sports and arts camps as well that the different providers offer. So a bit of a snapshot in time on stats there as well. Last year, we saw about 9% of kids getting fee subsidy out of the county, 16% in 2021 so far. We're not sure if that represents a trend or if that's just a bit of a blip in time, or if that's related to COVID. We're not sure about that, but we'll keep an eye on that one as well. If we move to the next one, we'll talk a little bit here about special needs resourcing. So again, the idea that different kids come into childcare with different needs. Some of the kids that come in are going to need some support in terms of an intellectual or physical disability. And so we partner with Lansdowne Community Center, which of course is the expert in that field. And they do a couple really neat things for us. They'll work with the providers themselves to build that education and awareness about how to work with special needs kids and support those families. And they'll also come into the centers and work with the children themselves and the staff. And often they'll help transition that child from the childcare setting into the school setting if that's their journey as well. So really good support there from Lansdowne that supports all of our centers across the community. We see now, again, statistical snapshot in time, about 22% of kids getting support through Lansdowne are those County of Brant kids. We'll move on to the next one there. Very good. So we'll talk a little bit about early on centers. And so I've talked exclusively now around childcare centers. You go on the wait list, you pick your site, you get your spot, maybe you get some financial support, maybe you get some special needs support. So all good stuff. But we also offer drop-in programming. So you might not even know you've been in early on if you've been to the Paris Library or Scotland Community Center or the Brantford Library, and there's a setup there where there's little kids playing on the floor and lots of toys and lots of activity happening. Good chance that's an early on center. And so those are drop-ins for kids of up to age 12, but they're very much used by those very little ones, those 0 to 4s, and they're very well used in the community. We know that in a typical year, we'll see 4,500 unique kids come through those centers. Now, when you think the total population of 0 to 4s in the county and the city is about 8,000, very high usage in terms of kids coming through and young parents using those early on centers. So that represents about 22% of the usage across the communities, as those would be County of Brant kids as well. So that's a really fun way for families to get connected to a public health nurse, to a librarian, or some of the other supports that they might be too shy to ask or make the call, but they can connect with them in a very casual way through those early on centers. We're really happy about those as well. I'll talk about one more program. We'll go to the next slide, and I'll talk about Journey Together. Again, something we're really proud of as well. Journey Together is Indigenous-led childcare and Indigenous-led early ons. So you don't need to be a child with an Indigenous background to access the childcare or the early on, but what we ensure happens there is that, led by Six Nations Social Services, those early on in that childcare setting really does infuse that cultural learning, those cultural teachings from an Indigenous perspective. So not only can you have an Indigenous-led childcare that has that focus or come into an early on, the coordinators from Six Nations Social Services also go out to those other childcares in the region and talk about Indigenous practices and Indigenous learning. So it's a great way to get that conversation happening with really young kids kind of across the childcare sector. So I'll move to my last slide here, which is program oversight. And I'll just pause for a second because I've made it all the way through this orientation without talking yet about money, but I will now just for a second. So sometimes I know for people it's frustrating to hear
Aaron, my
talk
apologies. Aaron, my apologies. I just want to make sure because the slides aren't going forward. I just want to make sure you're on the correct slide there.
Okay, yeah, I'm on system oversight and planning.
Sorry to interrupt you there. I just want to make
No,
sure. we're
not at all.
understood.
Thank you so much. Yep, very good. So yeah, just the very last piece, or just before I talk about the future of the childcare sector, I'll talk a little bit about how the money works in children's services. So essentially what happens is often staff will talk about minimum contribution or provincial contribution or service contracts, and that can get a little bit hard to follow. But essentially what happens in our world is right now in 2021, the County of Brantford puts up 175,000, about the city puts up about 920,000. That money goes together, and that is the key that unlocks about $16 million from the Ministry of Education. So I've talked a lot about money moving around the system, right? Support for childcare operators, subsidizing folks so they can afford to go to school, money for Lansdowne so they can do their work with the staff. The vast majority of that money is Ministry of Education money that we're just moving around and administering. So when you think about that in a return on investment lens, for that 174,000 that the county puts in to help unlock that Ministry of Education investment, about $3.5 million goes out as investment directly to childcare operators in the county, or to support families, or to support special needs, or to run early ons in the county settings. So there's lots of really interesting opportunities that come from that, working in that tri-party arrangement between the two municipalities and the Ministry of Education. So just to close off, just thinking about kind of program oversight and the work that we do in terms of accountability. When you think about the scale of the programs, the kind of dozens of operators and early on centers and all these things that are happening, there's lots of contracts, there's lots of data, there's lots of administrative work going back and forth between the operators and the system. So a lot of our work is to make sure that that ministry money and the municipal money is spent correctly, and there's accountability for that. So again, lots of contracts, lots of data, lots of due diligence, and lots of reporting. But we also have kind of a more exciting role, which is thinking about the future of the system. And there's three things that are really going to change in the near future. And two of them we're a little bit unclear on, and that would be, I guess all three were a little bit unclear on. One is like, what is the impact of COVID when it comes to childcare? We can look at a wait list today, but does that tell us what childcare is going to look like over the next 3 or 4 years? More work from home, maybe a shift in the economy, what that's going to look like? Will it be less pressure on the childcare system? Will it be, more adaptability in the childcare system, where parents and guardians are expecting different type of childcare to support their new working models? So that's an interesting piece we don't know the answer to. We also know the province is changing the formula. So we talked a lot about like giving money to operators to offset their costs. And the province gives us a certain amount to do that in the two municipalities. That number is going to change. The province has been talking about that for a couple of years. That may be good news for us locally. That may mean our number goes up. That may mean our number goes down because Halton region or Niagara region or somebody else gets more of the provincial share. So that's a bit of an unknown as well. And the last really big unknown is around the national child care strategy. So we know the federal Liberal government, that was a part of their re-election platform, talking a lot about getting childcare very affordable and doing that fairly quickly. We're not quite sure what that means, what the municipal role would be in that for both municipalities. So we're kind of standing by to wait for the agreement between the federal government and the provincial government to shake out and see what our responsibility will be with that. But all of that to say, we still want to put a plan together. And so for those of you on Social Services Committee, you've heard us speak to this already. What we want to do is come early next year and talk about what a 10-year childcare plan could look like. So as these pieces start to fall into place, how can we start to meet that demand? How can we think creatively with your staff and with city staff about, can we get some childcare, children's services supports into your new library or into your rec centers, into the rec centers on the city side. So we're really thinking about that in the next couple of months and how we try to wrap a plan together to be ready for what happens with that national childcare strategy and to be ready to respond to that community demand. So I'll leave it there. Lots of information at you very fast from all three of us, but I'm going to hand it over to our General Manager, Marlene. And then of course, we're all standing by for questions if you have them. So thank you, Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Aaron. So again, through the chair, I just want to highlight one other program that we work with through the service with the service management staff. In addition to the great programs and services that my colleagues have shared, the service management staff also develop and manage the emergency social service plan, and they work with the County of Brant's EOC in the event of an evacuation, which is a really critical component of the work that the team does in collaboration with the County of Brant. So in summary, I'll wrap things up for us. As the service manager, there are many programs and services that are provided across the consolidated municipal service manager region to support the well-being of our marginalized populations and our little ones. All services are provided to the residents of the county of Brant and the city of Brantford in varying degrees, dependent on need and availability, and we're happy and pleased to serve the population. So I'd like to thank you for your time. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the services, to speak to council, and we'd be pleased to open it up to questions.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. I will say you're right. That was a lot of information very quickly. I wish we would have had this presentation earlier. I've got a few questions myself, but it would have been great to have this earlier so we could have had some more in-depth questions. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back to committee. I'm sure there's some questions here. So we're going to do, first off, we're going to do questions only as far as the presentations are concerned, and then we will see if there's time afterwards to do some comments as well. So Councillor Howes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. First, thank you all for a tremendous amount of information. It'll take a little time for us to absorb all of that, but thank you each for what you do for the people of our communities. It's important work, and I know that it's often challenging work, and thank you all for what you do. My questions are going to be targeted more towards Deb, I think, on this subject of affordable housing. First, hi, Deb.
Hi.
First, the mayor and I participated in the mayor's joint task force on affordable housing over the last couple of years. I think we met there. I believe our council was anticipating seeing the final report and a presentation to our council on the final wrap up of that task force, and I don't think that happened. So one of my questions is can we still anticipate seeing that, and when? I'll rattle through all three of my questions then, and then hopefully that'll give you a chance to absorb. Question number 2 is specific to the subject of supply and demand related to affordable housing owned by the municipality, managed, where, as you said, where you are the landlord. Am I correct in noting that of the existing number of units, that there were 1,190 units between the two municipalities, and that 95 units, which is 8%, are found in the county of Brant? Then my next question is, so that's the supply part. The demand part is, if I wanted to make sure I'm noting this properly, that there's a total wait list currently of 1,450 people, and that 506, or 35% of that list, are people found in the county of Brant, who are currently in the county of Brant looking for affordable housing. Lastly, towards the end of your presentation, you discussed projects in progress, and you noted the Trillium, the next Trillium building as a project in progress. We're always happy to hear the Trillium project reference, and I'm wondering if you can give our council and the people listening an update on where that project stands right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, I can answer the first two. I'll let Marlene handle the third one. The final report from the mayor's task force, I think we had offered to come and do a presentation. That's still an open offer. We are willing and able to come at any point. We can set that up. We have lots of information to present on that task force. What we discovered, the properties, sites that might be suitable for development of affordable housing in the county and the city. So that's one piece of the mayor's task force. We're We're also looked at funding, potential funding to provide for those kind of developments. So yes, the answer is yes, we can do that, and happy to do that. The second part is a bit more tricky, supply and demand. You are correct that the number of units of the old legacy stock, LHC units, the local housing corporation, there's only 95 in the county. The reason probably is historic. Those units were created by the province. They located them where they felt the need was. They located majority of them in larger urban areas, but that's the historic reason. We've been trying to catch up really when we became responsible for housing back in 2000 when the responsibilities switched from the province to the municipal level, service manager level. Where we've tried to make up is in the rent supplement, trying to add that in. That's hard to do if the stock's not there. You need apartment units to negotiate with landlords, and in the new development, trying to create new development as well. But you're right, there isn't a real good rationale around that number. Supply-wise, demand is a little harder as well to figure out because people can select more than one place. So people are on both the city wait list as well as some of the County of Brant locations. And it's hard to say what that demand is, but at this point, people are so wanting anywhere to live that they have put their names on every place they can because the wait list is long, and the more places you apply to, the faster the process is. So it's hard to tell until we actually place people and they tell us that is where they want to live. Do we know the real demand? But you're right, the demand and the supply don't match. They don't match in the city either. We are desperately looking for as much funding as we can get to create more housing to meet the demand, and that's a big area. As for Trillium Way, I'll let Marlene answer that particular question.
Thanks, Deb.
Thank you.
So through the chair, I just want to add to Deb's comments, if I may, just regarding the demand, and she's articulated many of the items. But I will say that research has shown that rural residents will migrate to urban centers to secure accessible services. And as you in the county increase your services, we may start to see an additional increase in demand and the need for additional housing, affordable housing, in the county. And as a team, we are looking at a 10, 15, 20-year plan to bring forward so that we can capture that supply and demand as we move forward. Related to Trillium Way, as you are aware, there is agreement coming forward that the CAOs are working on, and the Trillium Way is part of those discussions. We have moved forward with preparing an RFP to be issued, and we will be issuing that when we are able to do so as per direction of both councils. We have also applied, or reapplied, I should say, to the RHI funding. And we are optimistic that we'll be successful in that funding application, which would support the funding for this significant project in the county. We have not yet heard of the announcements for that funding, but we are optimistic that we'll hear shortly. And once we have that, we will bring that to both councils to provide that announcement.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. Councillor Gatwer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question through you to Marlene. Marlene, you mentioned that our studies show that rural people tend to migrate in towards the urban areas to access studies or to access services. And I think I've heard that or read that before. Could you supply me with a copy of some of those studies, that how they determine that?
So through the chair, we have done some preliminary work as staff, and we are working with Laurier to get a more comprehensive review of the literature. We can provide you with the preliminary research that we have, and happy to provide it to all of council, and any subsequent research to validate that, we'd be happy to provide, and we can get that to you.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you very much, Marlene.
Perfect. Any other questions? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say, I think social services staff are doing a good job from where I sit. So please don't take offense at any of my questions. One thing I was missing, I was looking for was food banks. I believe there's some funding of food banks through social services. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, through you, Councillor Pierce, that is correct. There's some legacy agreements that happen through social services. I'm going to say about 2012, 2013. So there's a few different pieces of food funding. One is that there's a $15,000 payment that goes to the Brantford Food Bank, and the county pays the current caseload rate. So I'm going to call that about 7% just for rounded numbers. Into that, and in return for paying into that 15,000, the Brantford Food Bank works pretty closely with Salvation Army on Christmas food baskets and tries to get some of that funding out into the county as well. The county also pays a share of an $85,000 payment that we make for Brant Food for Thought, again at the caseload rate. And that is again something historical that came through Social Services Committee. And that is the breakfast programs that happen in both city and county schools for the kids that maybe don't have a breakfast at home. So there is some food bank and some food program funding that happens as well. Yeah.
Okay, I'd still like to dig into that some more, but all right. Like I say, I thought you skipped it, and you did skip it. So when we get a recommendation from our staff, from county staff, they always, one of the little headings they have is key strike. How does this action fit in with our key strategic priorities? And social services, Deb and you, Aaron, and everybody, Susan, they do the same thing. You know, you bring forward a motion or a recommendation or plan, and you always say how it fits into the city's key strategic priorities. And I'm just wondering, how do you see us aligning? How do we go about getting the county's key strategic priorities recognized by social services staff? Any thoughts on that?
So through the chair, that's a great comment and a great question, and actually one that I brought up recently. So we would be happy to do an overview of your strategic priorities and incorporate that into not just the reports, but more importantly, into the work that we do so that we're capturing those key priorities. So again, great thought, and thank you for bringing that forward.
Okay, I think Miranda, or Marlene, you appreciate the fact that there'll probably be some changes coming forward, and I think I apologize, I was on mute.
Went on mute there.
Just Marlene, I appreciate. I think you can appreciate the fact that there's going to be some changes in the way social services is structured as far as county-city relations go, and I think it's desired by both the county and by the city. Having said that, and I'll give you an example. Well, one was that key strategic priorities. Obviously, we've got some we would like to see lined up. As well, so some of those numbers you guys were throwing out earlier, they certainly don't they don't look good from the county's perspective. One of them was the rent supplements. There's out of 374, there were 17 in the county. So I think some of those things I think we would like to look at and just see, is this the right way to do things? And notwithstanding what you said, I appreciate that people that need services tend to migrate towards larger centers. But having said that, I think there's some, to me, there's some equity that's, I think the equity portion could be improved upon. Another example is just budgets. The Grand River Conservation Authority. sets the budget by the board. Well, we have representatives on the board, public health, same thing, John Noblehome, same thing, and on and on. Social services, as far as I know, is the only entity where we have members sitting on it, but we don't have any input into the budget, right? It's all done by the city, and then it's just given to us. So I'm just bringing up, like I said, I don't want you to take offense of what I'm saying, but I think these are some of the changes that we are looking forward to seeing. So in a way, I'm kind of glad, Marlene, that you're semi new to the job, because you're bringing in a fresh perspective, especially in light of where you come from. So I think you can appreciate that, and I look forward to the changes.
So through the chair, if I may, thank you for those comments and observations. I do come from Haldeman, Norfolk, as most of you are aware, and did serve both municipalities there. And a lot of the similar challenges that we faced there. And we did start to work in having Haldeman contribute to input into the budget. So definitely something we can work with here is, as we're preparing the budgets and as we move forward, work with county staff to be able to influence some of those bigger decisions.
Okay, appreciate it, Marlene.
Perfect. Any other questions? Okay, one question I have, if I could, I just want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. When you were talking about, I think this is to Aaron, when you were talking about the one list for childcare, one of the slides there, it said there's 673 unique children on the wait list. Is that because there's not enough childcare available, or just the fact that 673 unique children need assistance?
Yeah, through you, I think it's probably both. I think there's a good majority of those are kids that are waiting to get into childcare, if not all of them. I think what complicates it, almost similar to housing, is that families have a very particular idea of where they need that childcare, whether it's close to work or family. So I think the answer directly is yes. Those kids are waiting for childcare, but I think it's probably more nuanced than that, to the extent that they're probably waiting for a particular childcare or two to come available to them.
Okay, no, and I appreciate that answer, because that was going to be my next question: is it the fact that they're waiting for specific ones, and you hit that. So I appreciate that. Okay, any other questions? Councilor Ferrier.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a big fan of what social services does, and have been for a long time, back when I was a social worker serving both communities as well. My question might sound a little curt. It's been hinted at, but I wonder if there might be an actual answer. How come we didn't get a presentation or the presentation materials ahead of time? There is a lot of information here, and my sense is that at the city, if you were presenting this, not that you would, because it's part of the ongoing efforts there, that you would have had a presentation sent for folks to read over at first. And can we get you back if we have those questions as a committee and as a council, as opposed to just members of the Social Services Committee?
So
sorry to interrupt you there, Marlene, and just to circle back on something you said there. You said that you were going to send us the presentation, so if we can just assure that's done ASAP, that would be great. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
So my apologies. So through the chair to Councillor Lafayette, yes, we appreciate there was a lot of information that we shared today, and we did send the presentation to this county staff fairly tardy today, and we apologize for that. It was we've had some challenges with formatting, etc. We would be happy to come back and answer any questions, or just to be available to you either through this venue, or if you want to reach out to us individually, we're happy to talk to you. Also happy to talk through the Social Services Committee. So a lot of opportunity to ask questions and you know, enhance any of the presentation that you should have if you don't have already.
And actually, if I can just make one comment through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that. That's very helpful. You brought up that you're going to have to redo the 10-year housing stability program plan, I should say. I was in that committee way back when, and I happen to live in the county. And maybe something also to look at achieving is some proportional representation of county and city, whether it's staff, residents, and folks who work frontline in the communities, both communities, being on that committee, because I think it would help. I know we had some Six Nations members there, and that was helpful because there is a lot of cross-pollination. But I think there were two people who happened to identify as the county, and I don't think I was representing as somebody specifically because I happened to be a person who lived in the county at the time. So maybe having that as part of the creation of that committee would be helpful for some of these issues. Thank you.
Through the chair, I think we are open to all ideas of how to do that representational involvement better. As we start to plan for the next 10-year plan, I think we're wide open on ways to do that. Focus groups, membership on the steering committee, all sorts of different ways. Thanks.
That's perfect. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I just to kind of to wrap this section up, I just want to thank you guys on behalf of committee for coming. I think we can all agree that this is critically important things that involve everybody in our communities, and it's been alluded to earlier in the discussions, and I'll just say it again. Thank you very much, all of you, for what you do. It is critical on a day-to-day basis, and we appreciate the time and effort that's put into it. So with that being said, again, thank you for your time. And I think I don't see any other questions, so I will draw this one to a close and look forward to getting that presentation and potentially either getting his back to discuss as a council or individually on questions that may arise. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so committee, we did circle back to that. So looking back at the agenda, I do not see anything else on the agenda. So as our mayor often says, is there anything else for the betterment of the Councilor Miller?
Did you want a motion to move to receive that presentation?
Absolutely. Moved by Mr. Mayor Bailey, and seconded by Councilor Miller. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you very much. And if there's nothing else, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much for your time. Enjoy your evening, folks, and be safe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.